Hi there, this is Julie Werzer coming at you from Patchabilities, where I love to create small mini quilted fusible applique projects that invite beginners into quilting, and I keep them simple enough to finish in one day. I'm coming at you today with this quick short video. I'm back up. Stop the stuttering. I brought you here to my sewing machine today. You're not looking at the sewing machine. I'm bringing you to my sewing machine where I'm doing some blanket stitching on a brand new project. And if you could use some help on blanket stitching, this is your gig. Let's flip over. Okay, so what we're looking at here is all my pieces I have fused. I've cut out and fused them down to my background fabric with a fusible web. I have my sewing machine set on blanket stitch. My stitch length is at 2.0 and my stitch width is at 2.0. That's the standard default that my machine goes to when I turn it on, and I like that stitch, so I just leave it there. I'm only blanket stitching through just through one layer of fabric today because this is going on a runner. So I just need to applique blanket stitch down all of my shapes and then put the thing together. So I'm just bringing you in on this portion of blanket stitching. So I want to point out here a couple of things before I get started. I always make sure that my machine is set that when it stops, the needle is in the down position. I do that so that I don't have to think about switching it to the down position, and I can stop and pivot very easily. When I'm going around small corners, so here's where my tips begin. I take it slow. You always want to pivot, make your pivots when your project is, when your needle is on the right, or along the edge of the shape that you're stitching. You don't want to pivot when your needle is in the crossover position. You want to pivot when it's in the straight stitch position. Now, when I come down into some corners, some curves, I slow down my pace. I'll take a stitch or two before I pivot. See how I'm not pivoting? I'm going to give you an example here. I'm not going to now turn and pivot when my needle is in the crossover stitch because, well, that just wouldn't be smart. That would be dumb. Always make your pivots when your needle is on the straight stitch position of the blanket stitch. Okay, now I've come to a pretty tight point here. I sew right up so that my point comes down right off the end of the point. I keep my needle in that right position. It's going to cross over up there at that point, but that's okay. Nobody's really going to notice it. If your needle stops in the if it stops in the crossover position, just touch the feet of your pedal, just a smidge, to get it to come back. Now I've come up, if you can see this on the video, I've got another shape that's overlapping the one that I'm working on. I don't want to move on to this one yet. I want to finish. Now what the heck, I'll move on. See, these are things that you think about, that you work on. Okay, so let's just keep going. I'll come back to that and go right over that area. I'm coming into a curve, so I'm going to slow down the speed of my machine. I'm always monitoring where my needle is landing. You want it to be landing just off the edge of your applique shape. I've come into a tight corner again, a point, if you will. I pivot with my needle in the right straight stitching position, and then I take off and go again. And as you can see, I'm on a curve, fairly, not a super tight curve, but I'm on a curve. When I'm on an inside curve means this curve is on the inside. Yeah, it's called an inside curve. I don't know what to tell you. That's an inside curve. Oh, whereas this is an outside curve. I do find that I do find that I have to stop and pivot far more than I do on an outside. I've always got my hands on the project. You just want to be guiding, and as you can see, you kind of see, I roll up my project. I roll it up so that really all that's kind of exposed is where I'm sewing at. Whoop. I want to go back a stitch. I'm come up into a tight corner there. We're on the bottom side of the Y, so we're going to make the pivot. See how simple that makes pivoting when your needle is always, the needle of your machine is always stopping in the down position. I'm using a thread color that's matching my cream here. I get asked a lot about thread color, and I don't really think too much about it, you guys. I go with whatever's close on blanket stitching. We can't see it very well because my foot of my machine is in the way, but I've got a real small curve here up on the top of this Y. And so I make several stop and pivots to get my stitches to go around that small corner. Here I'm coming into another inside curve of the Y. When I come into a point, I just slow down with my foot pedal. I slow up with the foot pedal, and my machine responds very nicely, very quickly to when I push the, here I'm stopped. I'm going to give you for instance. When I'm stopped, I can touch my foot pedal once, and it will move. It'll go up. I can touch it again. It'll go down. If I just tap it once very quickly, it'll do probably a half of a stitch. You're going to have to play with your machine to see. Your machine is undoubtedly going to be different than mine. Not all machines behave the same way. So the more you practice blanket stitching, the better you're going to get. The more you learn, the more you become one with your sewing machine and the rhythm of your sewing machine, the better you will become. I've been sewing on this machine since 2004. It's what I do all of my blanket stitching on. So we are in sync. Yes, we are. Sorry about that. When I get to bigger areas, like a big wide curve or a straight area, I will kind of open it up and do a faster stitch. I do want to point something out to you. So I'm just going to kind of hold it up a little bit, see if we can see here. Yeah, we can a little bit. So right here on my stitching, I got off of the shape probably about the width of my needle, just a smidge. And I know that as beginners, we tend to be we tend to over critique ourselves. I just go with the flow. When I do have a spot where maybe I've gone off the rails by just a hair, I just correct it, you guys, and just come back in. And here, I've come back in just like one needle width too far into my shape, but I just kept on going. I find that if I just keep on going and just kind of ease back into where I'm supposed to be, it just blends in. Nobody's going to notice that. You wouldn't have noticed it unless I pointed it out. So give yourself a break. Enjoy the process, the learning process. And I hope you find this helpful. All right, I'm going to keep going here right up until the point where I'm going to meet back into the shape that I began on with you. And I'm going to show you how I transition from one shape to another, which are touching, all right, when I'm using the same thread color. So this is my last trick, and then I'm going to sign off. So this piece right here is overlapping this piece. So I would definitely want to blanket stitch on here, along this edge, so that it is completely down there. Okay, but now, so I've finished this one. I need to get back over to here. I use a technique that I call, I don't know, what do I call it? I don't know, probably travel and stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap my foot feet. I'm not going to cut off my threads and move my machine and then begin anew here. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to switch my machine over to straight stitch right there where I ended. I'm going to put my needle down so that it's going to be stitching right over the top of the edge of my blanket stitch that I just finished stitching. And I'm going to take it all the way down to where I'm going to begin blanket stitching again, lift my needle up, switch my machine back to blanket stitch, and then I'm going to lift my presser foot and I'm going to put my needle down right into the spot where I need it. And then we're going to take off and go again. So why in the world do I do that? I do that for a couple of reasons. Number one, I hate stopping and starting. I don't hate stopping and starting. I really dislike all of the little threads. I don't like the thread tails. So that's my way of avoiding the thread tails. Secondly, nobody can tell that I have now stitched over this area 2 times. First with the blanket stitch and second with the straight stitch right over the top of my blanket stitching. Nobody can tell that I went over that area, and it also saved me time. So try that tip. All right, you guys. Let's just I pushed my presser foot before I pushed the foot pedal before I had the presser foot set back down. So just stop. That happens when you're trying to talk and stitch at the same time. That can happen. Almost finished here with the E, and then that one got off on the corner there, but he'll be all right. When I make a mistake, I really don't I consider those small mistakes. Maybe your stitch gets off just a hair. Okay, can you see how far off that is? Oh my gosh. No, it's not off very far at all, is it? One little stitch, a little bit off the beaten path, and you know what? It's just fine. So I hope that the lesson that you learn from me showing you my little mistakes is that even the most seasoned blanket stitchers, there's another one, make mistakes. Okay, I'm coming up right into the end there. I started in this corner. So when I'm going to stop, I will do like one back stitch, and then I come back forward. My machine has a stop button on it. And what I do is I press the stop button, and so it's going to take several stitches there, and it's going to knot it. And that is it. Ooh, hello again. So I hope you've picked up a couple of blanket stitching tips from me today. If you liked this video, maybe not this angle of me because my phone is mounted here, but if you liked this video and found it useful, or know of somebody else that would think this video is very useful, please like it, share it, subscribe, and by gosh, have a great time stitching, will ya? Give yourself a break and embrace the learning. Bye. Thank you for watching.